Good morning. It is wonderful to see you all here. And for those of you who are listening from home on Monday nights, which is most of you, we are really glad that you're there continuing to learn and to grow with us. We are all one in spirit wherever we are. I know that a lot of you, I keep talking to you and hearing things, and I know that you're dealing with a lot of stress and fears and even some hopelessness associated with the present state of the world. The last thing we want to do at Unity is to stick our head in the sand and pretend that there are no problems out there to deal with. COVID-19, social and political upheavals, hurricane season here in New Orleans, etc. There are always issues to deal with. We do, however, want to use our wisdom when approaching these things and not fall into a state of fearfulness or hopelessness, a state that many people these days, I'm sure you know, are succumbing to. So today I'm going to talk about hope, help, and harmony. I'm sure we could all use a little extra serving of each of these, right? I think the first thing to remember is to see these issues in perspective. These are times no different from many others, really. In the last century, there were 2 world wars, a massive and long international depression, the AIDS virus, political upheavals in the 60s, and the Vietnam War, civil rights issues, and terrorism, to mention just a few. Unity was around during all of these, and the unity principles have not changed. Ancient wisdom never does. They are an oasis and a desert for those who really understand. The unity principles did not get channeled by Charles and Myrtle Fillmore. The Fillmores drew on ancient wisdom, Christian, Buddhist, Hindu, Sufi, to mention just a few. There really isn't any difference between the essential ideas of any of these. They all say the same thing because wisdom today is the same as it was 5,000 years ago or at the beginning of time. True wisdom is eternal and universal. These truths have allowed people who can see to access higher and nobler and saner perspectives on life. Fashions, fads, and our ideas about what is important on the material plane come and go, as we all know. But wisdom doesn't change. Such things as the oneness of all life, love, compassion, non-attachment to the ever-changing physical world, etc. When we remember that the world is in divine order, we will see that there really aren't any problems. Situations to deal with, yes, absolutely, but problems, no. When we see the world through Christ vision lenses, imagine if these are Christ vision lenses, we will see it as whole, healthy, and divine. And it becomes that to us. When we see it as sick, chaotic, and hopeless, it will be that. And if we wait for the world to conform out there to our programmed ideas of what it should be in order for us to be happy, we're barking up the wrong tree. There have always been and always will be issues out there onto which we can project our fear and our negativity. But our job here at Unity as truth students is to learn not to project our mental stuff onto the neutral, moving molecules out there that we call people and events. Just think about that a minute. That's how Jesus healed the sick. He saw them as whole from the start, and that's how we will heal our problems, by seeing them as whole and in divine order. Jesus didn't arrogantly tell the sick, "Oh, you're not really sick." And we're not going to say, oh, there's no COVID-19 or social injustice or hurricanes. That would be ludicrous. Jesus went to the sick and he talked to them and he saw them as whole, no matter what seemed to be the case. He told them they were no longer sick and to rise, and they weren't. The lesson here is that we too need to see what we deem as sick out there as whole and part of the divine order of things. And a little lagniappe is that they are also an opportunity for us to apply this ancient wisdom and the unity principles and not to see them as fearful or hopeless. Doesn't mean they're not happening. In the Bible, Jesus walked on water. That is, he rose above the emotional turmoils of life. That's what water represents, the emotions. Why? Because of his inherent wisdom, which he and other great masters have all taught us that we too can use and live by. These things that I do, ye shall do also, and greater, Jesus said. There is great hope. We just need to access our inner wisdom so that we can see these outer events for what they are, issues to see differently, to deal with perhaps, and to grow from. We can watch what emotions and thoughts they trigger in us and deal with them. We can observe our reactions to them and free ourselves from our old programming. We too can walk on water, so to speak. We can walk above our emotional reactions. Unity co-founder Charles Fillmore, in his seminal book, The Revealing Word, defines hope as, and I quote, the expectation of good in the future, the certain knowledge that our good is ours right now. Our good is ours right now. Everything is for our good right now. The same situation that our conditioning might see as bad can be viewed as good. What often happens is that we project onto these neutral situations our fears and negativity, and then, worst of all, we then start reacting to our projections. Think about it. We're then 2 steps away from reality. For example, some people see the political situation as bad and they move to another country or get super angry or stressed out about their projection. Other people see the same situation as good because it's making people think and ushering in a new era. Both sets of people are just making a reality out of and reacting to their own projections out there. Neither is seeing reality in an absolute sense. Just some masses of protoplasm out there emitting sound and light waves, ultimately. When Charles Fillmore said, that which is sought is already ours for the taking, he meant it. No matter what is happening out there, if we don't let our programmed thoughts and judgments taint it and create negativity, fear, and judgments, we will understand that all is always in divine order, no matter what. Sure, we may struggle with some things. We might have struggled with Latin or calculus or physics, but they weren't inherently bad. We might have felt uncomfortable in the class, but that didn't mean that calculus, Latin, or physics were inherently evil. And after we mastered those lessons, we saw that they were just neutral phenomenon. Think how much easier and maybe even fun those classes might have been if we hadn't projected all kinds of negativity and fear on them. Life's classes are the same way. So, hope in that situation would have been knowing that all was in divine order. We just need to get our thinking in divine order. We just need to get our thinking We have to see it. We have to stay out there and be the witness and watch it and then deal with it. Little by little, usually, but we have to get our thinking straight. And this doesn't mean that we might not work to change certain situations, like inventing a COVID cure or finding social and political solutions or fixing the New Orleans flood situation. But in the meantime, there should always be hope. Hope about making things better, hope about seeing them differently, and hope about learning and growing from these things. Let me tell you a story. Once upon a time, there was a group of people, the Philistines, who had gathered their armies for battle against Israel, symbol of the chosen people. The people of Israel trusted that God would help them. But there in the Philistine camp over there was this giant named, what was that giant's name? Goliath, great, who was over 9 feet tall and decked out with sword, spear, and shield. No ordinary man could defeat him. Israel's king Saul had great trust that God would save the chosen people. But who could match Goliath? It was certainly enough to make one lose hope, right? Now, seen as an allegory, I'm sure many of us have felt like COVID, recent political and social problems, and the threat of a major hurricane have seemed like Goliath out there. We may have faith in the divine order of things, but how can we vanquish such a perfect storm of all three of them, and with so many major issues to deal with? Our Goliath, right? So maybe we feel stressed and fearful and hopeless at times. What do? Metaphysically speaking, which is how Unity interprets the Bible, Goliath is part of us. Every place and person in the Bible and object is part of our psyches. In that way, the Bible is a blueprint toward enlightenment. It's the part of our psyches that believes that there is out there some insurmountable problem, when in reality it's our thinking about the problem that is the problem. In the story, Israel's king Saul didn't have the solution to his Philistine enemy, Goliath, any more than we do about our seeming problems. Social unrest, an international pandemic, and hurricane season, for example. We often feel powerless to face this kind of situation. Now, keep in mind that metaphysically, Goliath doesn't represent the giant problem out there, like it maybe does allegorically. Goliath represents what we have created in our minds about the issues out there. And since the biggest problem is what is in our mind, the solution is there too. A change in the way we view the external issues, and a wiser and surer way to solve the issue based on wisdom, not an emotional, programmed reaction to our projections. So, what is King Saul going to do about this war with the Philistines and Goliath? Who will face him? What are we going to do to conquer what we view as problems out there? Well, in the story, you might remember a young boy named, oh, y'all are wonderful, named David stepped up. David was young. He was small in stature, and he wasn't even a soldier. He was a shepherd boy. King Saul dismissed the offer at first, of course, but David told him that he had single-handedly defeated a lion and a bear when they attacked his sheep, and that he could surely kill Goliath. Well, King Saul was actually out of options because no one would risk his life against this huge giant. So he accepted David's offer and even gave David his personal armor, but David refused. It was too heavy, and he didn't need it anyway. David knew that his armor was God. He didn't need traditional material solutions. They were extra weight to him. The king said to David, "Go, and the Lord be with you." and off the young shepherd boy went to fight this mighty warrior, Goliath. Now, metaphysically, David represents that part of us that is innocent and trusts in God, the part of us that uses wisdom, not material arms or brute strength, often symbols of the ego. David relied on a higher form of strength than that of the physical world. Which part of you do you rely on? Your domineering and material-based ego, or your essence, that still small voice that follows wisdom and higher order values? David chose 5 stones out of the gravel and took his little slingshot in hand and went toward Goliath. The slingshot, of course, represents our wisdom tools, which can defeat any seeming obstacle. When Goliath saw the young shepherd boy, he laughed and said, "Oh, come on to me. I will give your flesh to the beasts and fowls." David answered Goliath and said, "You come against me with sword, spear, and shield, but I come against you in the name of the Lord, the God of the army of Israel, whom you have denied. I will slay you and take your head and give it to the beasts of the earth and fowls of the air, so that all the earth may know that there is a God in Israel." And then the little shepherd boy David took out one of the stones from his bag, put it in his slingshot, slung it, and struck the Philistine giant Goliath in the forehead. Goliath fell to the ground. David then went over to him, took Goliath's sword, and cut off his head, while the Philistine army fled the battlefield. Now, David, symbol of wisdom and innocence, had prevailed over Goliath's power and material weapons. The David part of us can always prevail over the Goliath part of us. Wisdom and purity always trump evil and materiality in the long run. This is the meaning of Israel's defeating the Philistines. In 1 Samuel 18, it goes on to say, David was a man of understanding in all ways, and the Lord was with him. And that is the point of the story for us. David was a person of understanding. In all ways, the Lord, symbol for truth or wisdom, was with him. When we truly understand the truth principles and live by this wisdom, we are able to vanquish anything. We change our thinking and remember, as Fillmore said, that which is sought is already ours. David's little slingshot was already his. He didn't need King Saul's material armor. When we see things differently, we will start seeing our former problems with hope, as David did. Israel won the battle because they were the chosen ones. Who are the chosen ones? What does that mean? The chosen ones are those of us who have chosen ourselves to live by higher values than the material ones. In the end, those virtues will always defeat evil or brute strength or materiality or any seeming problem out there. That wisdom is as applicable during the storms of life and our Goliaths as it was 3,500 years ago. We must remind ourselves that it doesn't matter what the outer situation is. There is always hope. That's the meaning of that story and so many of the stories in the Bible, if we read them metaphysically. And that brings us to the second point for today, which is help. And the wonderful thing about that is that we don't need to depend on any outside force for help. We are all armored right now, as Fillmore said, with our little slingshot. It's great if we can find solutions to the social injustice COVID-19 and flood problems, and many are working hard to do so, and we all should. But in the meantime, we can help ourselves not to stress or panic or fear or get hopeless. We can change the way we view these issues. We can quit projecting on them stress and fear and negativity. Our little slingshot is prayer and meditation and self-observation, which result in our seeing reality more clearly. Usually our suffering has little to do with the external issues out there and everything to do with what they trigger in us. Probably old feelings of insecurity, fear, or helplessness from childhood that we can get free of. It's all about how we view these situations. It's not the situation. You all understand. Everybody here at Unity knows that your thinking creates your world. You understand that the only real evil out there is what you have been programmed to label as such. That's not sticking your head in the sand and pretending that change isn't needed. No, that's understanding, as Shakespeare so aptly said that we repeat often around here, there is nothing good or bad, but thinking makes it so. It just takes remembering that wisdom. You are the best, surest, and most reliable help for you. When you meditate and pray and stay open to your oneness with that wisdom, you will see clearly. Change your thinking and change your world. That's the surest help there is. And it's 100% in your hands. It's a decision away. Just ask God to help you see things differently. And you will, and there will be no problems to stress out about or get negative or fearful about. Just issues out there to take care of and to grow from, even if it's to develop the patience of Job. And the third point for today is harmony. It's an offshoot of the first and second points of hope and help, of course. When you maintain your hope and help yourself gain wisdom and change your thinking, you will have harmony in your life, no matter what is going on out there on the material plane. In closing, I'd like to tell you another story. It's about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. I have a hard time pronouncing Abednego because when I was a Girl Scout at camp singing that song, I always said Abednego. Talk about undoing old childhood things. So pardon me if I slip back into that. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. There were three characters in the Bible who believed in hope, help, and harmony in the form of God. They were steadfast in their belief, but their king Nebuchadnezzar demanded that they and everyone in the kingdom fall down and worship the king Nebuchadnezzar's God. Doesn't that sound a lot like what's going on today? Some of us have our own beliefs, but society, symbolized by King Nebuchadnezzar, has other ideas about what is important and acceptable. The God of materialism, the belief in fear, negativity, and hopelessness about the world, and maybe dealing with them with drugs and alcohol, etc. Well, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego refused to give up their God, their beliefs. So, anybody remember that one, what the king did? He condemned them to be burned. Very good. Raise your hand. Who said that? Whoa, very good, Jane. Doesn't hurt to have a PhD in comparative religion, huh? Like Jane. All right. Yes, they were condemned to be burned in a mighty fiery furnace. I'm sure you can relate to being punished by your peers or society for marching to a different drummer. Sometimes it seems that the whole world is involved in money, power, and ego pursuits, right? And that maybe it's we who are worshiping the wrong God and we'll get left behind or something. Fast forward to the day of the punishment for Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They would not give up their beliefs in their God, their value system, even though their king, or for us maybe peer pressure, is pushing them to do so. As a result, they were thrown into the blasting furnace. Maybe it feels that way to you sometimes when you're rejected by those whose beliefs you don't go along with. But while in the furnace, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, instead of being consumed by the fire, rose up and began to walk around in the midst of the flames, praising the Lord. And an angel appeared and walked with them. When the king, Nebuchadnezzar, saw this, he was afraid. Then he saw them come out of the fire with not a hair on their heads singed. And that is the point of the story, of course. We have no need to lose hope, ever. There is always help, symbolized by that angel that came to be with them, or wisdom is what she represented, who walked in the fire with them and protected them. There is always the possibility of harmony when we steadfastly adhere to what we know is right. Wisdom, ancient wisdom. And the interesting thing is that when King Nebuchadnezzar saw the power of their God, he made a decree that everyone in his kingdom should worship the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. He saw that their God was much greater than his. And that is what these truth lessons are all about, metaphysically, is helping your inner King Nebuchadnezzar see the light and commit to a higher value system, the ancient wisdom. Ultimately, right views, wisdom, purity, and good always prevail. After seeing the truth of things, King Nebuchadnezzar decreed that anyone who wouldn't worship the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in his kingdom would be cut to pieces and their houses plundered. Being cut to pieces and their houses plundered, metaphysically, is a symbol for how our lives won't work unless we ascribe to live by these higher values. Things just somehow fall apart eventually. King Nebuchadnezzar represents the part of our psyches that grow in understanding and change. And that is our greatest hope, help, and opportunity for harmony, a change in our thinking, like Nebuchadnezzar's. It is our chance to live a higher, more noble, saner, and better life. And the way to do that, our little slingshot, so to speak, is to get silent in prayer and meditation and become one with the life force, the divine matrix, that omnipotent, omniscient, and omnipresent wisdom that we often call God. As Fillmore said, everything we want is already ours. We just need to focus clearly, see it, and then commit to seeing that way forevermore and living that way. So as you go through your week, when your outer and inner Goliaths and King Nebuchadnezzars come forth at you, maintain your hope. Use the help of your higher wisdom. Use your slingshot, and you will walk right through the seeming fires and Goliaths of your life, unscathed, with not a hair on your head singed. Hold fast to your wisdom, to your higher principles, and you will defeat the Goliaths and convert the Nebuchadnezzars in your consciousness, and thus rest in harmony. It is already yours for the taking, as Fillmore said, and you deserve it.